YouTube, my name is Danica and today I want to do my June wrap-up. So in June I managed to finish 12 books. Most of them were authors that are going to be at LeakyCon, other than the Tamora Pierce books, which Mark is reading and I'll be seeing him at LeakyCon, and a couple of just general geeky or Doctor Who books that I'm reading in anticipation for LeakyCon as well, so that's my LeakyCon speech for the video. So the first books I read in June were The Protector of the Small Quartet by Tamora Pierce. These are similar to her Alana series. It's about a young girl who wants to become a knight, but in this series Kel is becoming a knight openly as a girl. She's not disguised as a boy, and she's dealing with all the misogyny that comes with that, and I really loved this series. So far I'd definitely say it's my favorite Tamora Pierce series. It's interesting because there's a lot less magic. It's much more just her as a person trying to overcome these things without any extra abilities. I really loved it. If you haven't read Tamora Pierce, definitely pick them up. I recommend starting with the Alana series and continuing, but Protector the Small I think was my favorite so far. Next I read Geektastic Stories from the Nerd Herd, edited by Holly Black. This is a collection of short stories, and interspersed are little comics, mostly by Scott O'Malley, who did the Scott Pilgrim series. And I really liked these. They were actually better than I was expecting. There weren't really any stories that were life-changing or anything, and I don't think there's any that have really stuck with me, but I still really enjoyed reading it. Next, I finished the audiobook of The Magicians by Lev Grossman, and I've heard a lot of really good things about this book on BookTube, so I was quite surprised that I really didn't like this book. I don't know if it's partly because I listened to it as an audiobook and it felt like it dragged on forever, but I really didn't like the main character. He was super irritating. There was a lot of kind of casual sexism in the book, and I think it's part of the characterization of him. It's not necessarily supported by the author, but it just wasn't something I really wanted to read about. And the plot kind of meandered. It goes through different sections of his life. It follows him through school and then after school, and then there's a third part that I won't spoil you for. But overall, I just really didn't find much to connect to. There are very few characters that I actually cared about, though I did care about the side characters much more than I cared about the main character, who got more and more infuriating with time and didn't have any depth, so it wasn't like he was interesting, he was just irritating. And then it just sort of drops off because there's a sequel. I loved the premise, and that this was going to be more of a teenaged or grown-up look at kind of Harry Potter, which is surprising because it's much more to do with Narnia than it is to do with Harry Potter. I'm definitely not going to be continuing with the series. I'm really surprised because I've heard a ton of good things, and I found very little to like. And then I read Fan Culture, so C-U-L-T, cult, all caps, Essays on Participatory Fandom in the 21st Century, which is a collection of essays about fandoms, kind of academic. I was also disappointed with this one. They really didn't go into the kind of depth that I would have liked. I see much more thorough discussion in Tumblr comments than I do in these essays. Most of them just sort of gave an overview of sort of the history of different fandoms. There were only one or two essays that I thought actually had an interesting thesis, and I was most excited to read the essay about Harry Potter fanfiction, and that one was the most disappointing because it basically seemed to say, sexual fanfic, maybe not terrible, maybe not completely evil. Like, that was her final point. It really had no sort of depth. It was obvious that the author didn't read fanfic or didn't understand why anyone would read or write fanfic, and seemed just generally puzzled by the entire thing. I don't really know who the intended audience is for that, but it's certainly not Harry Potter fans. So again, wasn't super impressed with that one either. And then I read the Doctor Who Omnibus Volume 1, which is a collection of different comics about Doctor Who, focusing mostly on the 10th Doctor and Martha as his companion. Martha is my favorite companion, so I had to pick this one up. I enjoyed it. It's a selection of different ones by different artists and different authors, so they definitely vary a lot, but some of them I really loved. Some of them wasn't as much of a fan of. I definitely think this one is worth picking up. And then I read Geek Girls Unite, How Fangirls, Bookworms, Indie Chicks, and Other Misfits Are Taking Over the World. And again, I think I was expecting maybe not something more academic from this, but at least a little more in-depth. This is a really quick, easy read, but she definitely has an idea of what the acceptable fangirl is, and it's really heteronormative and kind of competitive between girls. Like, there's this idea that it's geek girls versus every other kind of girl. It was mostly that kind of heteronormativity and kind of sexism, really, that irritated me about this book. Definitely don't recommend picking this up. This is not a feminist book at all. And then I read Trickster's Choice by Tamora Pierce. I love Tamora Pierce's writing, but this has been my least favorite Tamora Pierce book so far. I just found it a really slow read. Just overall, I'm less interested in it. I do like the idea. I like that the main character is trying to be a spy, and that she's very cunning, and she's really different from Tamora Pierce's other protagonists. I do like her, but this story doesn't really grab me. I just feel like it could have been a lot shorter. This feels like it could have been a 300-page book instead of two 400-page duology. But I'm continuing with the sequel, Trickster's Queen, and hopefully I will like that one better. I'm a quarter of the way through and I still kind of feel the same way, but it's Tamora Pierce, so I have faith. And then I read 13 Little Blue Envelopes by Maureen Johnson. Wasn't really expecting a lot from this one. I just wanted to read a Maureen Johnson book. And I ended up really enjoying this one. It's so quick to read, especially after reading Trickster's Choice and feeling like that was really dragging. This one just sped along. I think I read it in 2 days, and I love the idea of this kind of trip around the world following what's revealed in these envelopes. And I also really liked that, surprisingly, it's a little bit darker than I was expecting. I was expecting more sort of goofy adventure, but it is more serious than that in a way, though there is also this wacky travel aspect of it. So I'm actually going to be continuing with the sequel. I really liked it. I think I'll be picking up more of Maureen Johnson's books in the future. And then lastly, I read Doctor Who, The Visual Dictionary by DK. If you're familiar with DK, they do a lot of these really visual books, lots of big pictures and then sort of describing different things about the pictures. They do sort of cross-sections and things. This one is focused on New Who, obviously, and mostly features the 11th Doctor. It was a lot more thorough than I was expecting. It's hard to kind of rate things like this because obviously it didn't blow my mind and change my life, but it was, for what it is, I think it's very well done. It is, like I said, very New Who centric and very focused on the 11th Doctor, but I learned lots of new things. I expected it to be kind of a quick overview with the kind of knowledge you would expect from someone who'd watched New Who once, but it's actually a lot of detail, so I enjoyed it. So those were all the books I read in June. Let me know if you've read any of these and if you enjoyed them. And if you have a June wrap-up, feel free to link it in the comments and I will definitely check that out. And thank you for watching. Bye!